Hello, Ben.
Hello, Chezi, Rabbi Chezi.
God.
Was that name? Were you responsible for that? The name change, title change.
Is my title different now? Oh, holy crap. I just noticed this right now. He's out of control. No, I'm going to change this right now because I'm not a rabbi. What is going on over here? Edit name. Rabbi Chezi Spiro. Say, it's going to get me in trouble. Crazy person. Jacob. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thank God. Doing well. Had a nice long weekend up north. And yes, Jacob did. And my twin sister had she had twins, but she also 2 weeks ago, but she also had her daughter's bat mitzvah, her coming of age celebration. So we were up north having a party last night. So that was a lot of fun. It was actually where her wedding was 17 years ago. So her and I had this like big dance that her and I did together.
You had a number.
Right. So people were requesting that we redo the dance.
Yeah. That's fun.
So fun being with family, of course. Fun, having a good time, dancing. So that was very, very nice. As the summer continues, what about you? Work okay?
Yeah, work okay. Yeah, I also came back from California visiting my wife's family, so that was nice to be with some family. And her brother has his son too is like a 2-year-old, so we were hanging out with the nephew. So it was fun.
Where's your son? Where's your wife from?
She's from California.
I got you. She's like American. Any Israeli background? One of the parents Israeli or something like that?
No Israeli. No Israeli relations.
Hey Jason, you're welcome to join us as well. It's good to see you too.
I met her here when we met here in New York.
How's her Hebrew?
It's decent. And not speaking, but reading and reading mostly.
And does your mom or dad speak to her in English or in Hebrew?
No, in English, only English.
I got you. And the sibling, I'm saying, but let's say if you're talking to your brother, are you interacting with him in Hebrew and she's just picking it up?
No, not enough for that.
I got you.
Like on WhatsApp, maybe. But live, it's all difficult.
I got you. Okay, very, very cool. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to share a text?
We can. Yeah, I have it up.
Which one? Does Chabad have one again? Does Safari have one?
I don't think they have 8 chapters. I can verify, but I just have the Safari one here.
Yeah, sure. Pop it up. I'm assuming it's translated.
It is translated. And here. Here we go.
Okay.
So
right, there's the introduction. Right. I forgot. There's the
right. Yeah.
So the 8 came as well. Okay. So how best to go about this? First off, let's talk a little about Maimonides. Who's the character we talk about? Even though we talk about him very often, right? So I think many people know who he is. But just as far as like some background, which I'm sure a lot of us right? His name is not Rambam or Maimonides. It's Moshe Ben Maimon, right? Son of Maimon. And then he's known as Maimonides. He's actually buried here in Tveria. Here, I say here because I was just there this morning. But he's buried in Tveria. And that's why his name is an acronym for Rabbi Moshe Ben Maimon, right? Rambam.
Yeah.
He's born in Cordova around 900 years ago, and he dies. I can't remember if he dies in Egypt, but he definitely moves to Egypt for a while. He's there. Um, he has a devastating blow to his brother. His brother dies, which really puts him in a deep depression for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
He obviously is known as a renowned philosopher, medieval philosopher, and a Torah scholar, obviously, but he was also a physician, right? He worked, he was a very famous doctor. And his two most famous works are the Mishnah Torah, right, which is the codex, right? He writes for the Jewish law that Jacob and I often talk to and reference, and this is definitely one of definitely a pillar with regards to Jewish law. And then around 20 years later or so, he comes out with the Guide to the Perplexed, his famous philosophical, work. In Hebrew, it's Moreh Nevuchim, which is the perplexed or the embarrassed, and it has to do with dealing with the tension of secular philosophy and religion, and how those two things can work together, or they can. It's written in a very cryptic way, and it's on shorthand. It's called the Guide or the Moreh.
Yeah.
So that's how we reference it in Hebrew, and sometimes if we speak about it over here, I might reference the Guide. And is there anything else to talk about Rambam? Clearly, because of his context, he is, well, take a step back. What he tried or what he attempted to do is integrate Aristotle's philosophy and Jewish thought. I would also say that's Plato's, even though like more downstream from that. And he's known as a rationalist. Very much so as a rationalist, which is many times we speak about in this channel about mysticism, Kabbalah, Hasidut, right? So that's sort of a very different flavor. And his famous, aside from the Bible and all the sages, all the Jewish sages, there's El Farabi and Ibn Sina. These are the two Islamic philosophers who clearly influenced him, who he quotes. They also have integrated Greek philosophy, and he's working off of them as well, which is quite interesting. So he was a very renowned man, a philosophical figure, and as we said, definitely a heavy hitter.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're going to be, and for the next few months, I'm assuming, we're going to be going over his work on the Shemona Prakim, these 8 chapters of Rambam, where he basically it's the undergirding and the philosophical underpinnings of ethics of the fathers, which we've just went through. But we're getting to see on the back end right now sort of how the Rambam, again specifically the Rambam, viewed this and understood these ideas of morality, specifically with regards to how they manifest in the ethics of our fathers and downstream throughout Jewish law and philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's good to note that while my tendencies are, I grew up fairly, my Maimonides, my Midian camp, which is like the Brisker school of thought. So it's not strange to me. Over the years, I have become more open and more interested in the Hasidic school of thought. I mean, I believe in really having a combination of all. But here specifically, because we're learning the Rambam, we're going to be focusing on the Rambam. And now and then, I guess, I'm not really planning, but I'm sure I'll end up slipping up and sprinkling in some of my own thoughts. But generally speaking, I'm giving you Rambam's opinion over here.
Yeah. Sounds good. And so one question to start. I mean, you kind of mentioned about Mishnah Torah and the Guide, which are both the two big works by Rambam. In terms of timeline, when was this written? Before, after, during? I know that it took him time to go through it. So can you kind of share a little bit about that?
Share about what? I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
about when was this written? Before the guide, or like in terms of
This is written. I got what you're saying. This is written before the guide. This is during the period when, and this could be confirmed, but this is during the period while he's writing the Mishnah Torah or right afterwards. I believe, and we'll see this as we read this, he references the book of prophecy, that he's going to write the rest of the stuff that he talks about in the book of prophecy. The book of prophecy, though, never comes to be, and it ends up, portions of it end up getting stuffed into the guide. So this is happening before the guide.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
1 second. Just seeing comments over here. Aristotle, angry faces. Okay. Right. Again, we're in the sphere of Maimonides, right? So he's clearly very influenced by this person.
Mm-hmm.
Seducing perfectly pious rationalists into philosophy. And systematic and theology. Now actually throwing up. I got you. Okay. So clearly he's not excited about this. Young God, thank you for joining us. And if I could say this publicly right now again, I am sorry for calling you out. People know my reasons, and people also know my apology now. Maybe being too quick on the trigger. And as far as I'm concerned, Young God is loved, cherished, and welcome member of the community. Okay, I would say to go about this, because these are long texts, let's read through the text. We'll read through it in, I guess, Hebrew. You'll go through a one read in English, and then we'll just sort of free conversation, sort of talk about these topics. Okay, so how about you start with Hebrew with the in English in the introduction, and I'll do in Hebrew, whatever you want.
Yeah, I can go with English. Let me just get it.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Okay. So this is the forward. The author, Rabbi Moses, may God preserve him, said, "We have already explained in the introduction to this work, in the commentary to the Mishnah, the reason the author of the Mishnah had for putting this treatise, the Avot, in this order, Nizikin, right? We have 6 orders, so this the Avot is in the Nizikin. We have also mentioned the great benefit that is to be derived from this treatise, and have promised many times in preceding passages to discuss certain important points at some length, commenting upon it. For although the contents of this treatise seem clear and easy to understand, yet to carry all that it contains is not a simple matter for everybody. Moreover, not all of its contents is intelligible without ample comment. With all that it leads to great perfection and true happiness. For these reasons, I have deemed it advisable here to go into a more lengthy discussions. Besides, our rabbis of blessed memory have said, he who wishes to be saintly, let him practice the teaching of Avot. Now, there is nothing that ranks so high with us as saintliness, unless it be prophecy. And it is saintliness that paves the way to prophecy. As our rabbis of blessed memory said, saintliness leads to holy inspiration.
Avodah Zarah. Well, it leads to Ruach HaKodesh, I would believe, in English, in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Saintliness. Yeah, and what is saintliness in Hebrew? What does it say here?
Chassidut.
Chassidut, yeah. Thus, their words make it clear that putting into practice of the teachings of this tractate leads one to prophecy.
Tractate being the tractate of Avot.
I shall later expound the truth of this assertion, because upon it depends a number of ethical principles. Further, I deem it fit to preface the commentary on the respective halachot, proper by some useful chapters, from which the reader may learn some basic principles, which may later serve as a key to what I am going to say in the commentary. Know, however, that the ideas presented in these chapters and in the following commentary are not of my own invention. Neither did I think out the explanation contained therein, but I have gleaned them from the words of the wise occurring in the midrashim, in the Talmud, and in other of their works, as well as from the works or the words of the philosophers, ancient and recent, and also from various works of various authors. Right. As one should accept the truth from whatever source it proceeds. It's an important point that Rambam gives.
Right, there's going to be, obviously we're going to discuss this, but it's very much the Rambam.
Yeah. Sometimes I may give a statement in full, word by word, in the author's own language, but there is no harm in this, and it is not done without the intention of it is not done with the intention of glorifying myself by presenting as my own something that was said by others before me. Since I have just confessed my indebtedness to others, even though I do not say so and so said, which would necessitate useless prolixity or make it verbose. Sometimes, too, the mentioning of the name of the authority drawn upon might lead one who lacks insight to believe that the statement quoted is faulty and wrong in itself because he does not understand it. Therefore, I prefer not to mention the authority, for my intention is only to be of service to the reader and elucidate for him the thoughts hidden in this tractate. I shall now begin the chapters, which, in accordance with my attention, are to serve here as an introduction, which is to consist of 8 chapters.
All right, so we just read, right, the intro, the forward, which is already showing how method, like the method that Maimonides had, right, the way he's thinking about these things, really, like, first, like, we didn't even start the conversation, he's already breaking it down to, like, there's going to be keys, there's going to be this, there's going to be that, so it's always fun to see how he would interact with these things. He's basically telling us over here. He starts with like, okay, like the reason why Avot is in this tractate, right? So one is that we have to, and you can see this in the word he has, we have to see this is trusted to the people that had the Masorah, had this information before us, and we respect the ones who had the Masorah before us, right? Like I'm bringing this down to you as part of a service to the reader, so I'm bringing it down for the people that were before me. So that's just like the classic reason why I would do that. Another reason is like he's mentioning us to over here, and it's sort of the people that need this are really the judges. These things are made for the righteous, the most righteous people, and it's sort of in a certain sense, it's telling you it's not. 1 second. Hello, Kirk.
Hello.
Okay.
Any questions, or you've been following?
I've been following.
Okay. I hope you're doing well. I hope your family's doing well.
Out of curiosity, so how many streams do you believe this will take?
17.
How many streams do I think this will take? There's 8 chapters. It's for sure going to be at least 2 sessions a chapter. So that's 16. And
that was close. I was just giving a guess.
Right, I'm saying at least 2, but probably more. So figure it's going to be over. Figure it would be over Hagilad. It would be over like the next 3 months or so, probably.
So yeah, about 17, about that range.
I'm sorry?
So around 17, probably a little bit more.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Are you already scheduling it in, Kirk? Like to make sure you're not.
No, I was just asking because I just want to know, like, when should I come on? Just curious.
I got you. Okay. Okay. So the people, right, who need to really know this and act in this kind of, know this kind of behavior and be sensitive to this are really judges, ultimately speaking, right? That Rambam is it's very important for sort of the righteous, and he's sort of talking to the elite off the bat. And it's very, very important for them to be aware of this, of course. Now, we would ask on that comment, which is like, Chezi, how would you saying that it's only important for the judges? Why would it not be important for the layman as well, right? Why is it not important for you or me? And Maimonides' sense is that if you or I are immoral, it sucks, but it doesn't really affect all of society. However, if the judges are corrupt, right, then downstream from there, you basically have chaos, right? So there needs to be, off the bat, this is very important to make sure that people in the positions of power or wield the levers of power need to be acting in a very just and moral way. We could obviously see both in America and in Israel, but other places that that clearly power, we're aware that power corrupts, but it would do good for everyone, both in the American and Israeli governments, to read Pirkei Avot and take these things obviously seriously, because you clearly see these things not manifesting on the ground, and because of that, we are clearly, you could see that you're dealing with a problematic system. And just as an example, just because Gilad is here and he reminds me of it, right? So if you have someone problematic like Itamar Ben-Gvir in charge of your police, right? So his morality is in question, which then puts the position in question, which then downstream, one could argue the way the police are now acting as a body itself is not moral, right? So you could see that's why these things are, so Maimonides is not worried necessarily about cop number one. He's worried about Betzalel Shma. He's worried about Ben-Gvir not being moral. Of course, the cop should also be moral, but the devastation that a corrupt Ben-Gvir could do is much worse than the corrupt individual. So that's why.
Where's the source of that?
This, I'm just letting you know that this is what the Rambam means when he's talking about, like, it's in the context of, okay, we're going to get there in a moment, but all of this. The whole Shmona Prakim are really all to build the scaffolding for the intellect.
Right.
And the intellect is something that only far and few between people could actually achieve. So generally speaking, the Rambam, when he's speaking about the ethics, it's true to everyone, but it's a mission for the elect. It's a mission for the righteous. It's a mission for the leaders. It's a mission for the judges, who built in are already people that are moral and just and all those things. So usually Rambam is talking to people like that. It's a little cold to think about it that way, but we have to also remember that according to Maimonides, almost no one even has hashgacha prati, divine providence. Right? The only person that have divine providence are the people that are fully oriented, that are with their intellect, and that means they're already moral, and that means they're looking at the landscape and understanding what's happening around them in such a way where, using the matrix analogy, they could see the code. And because they could see the code, they could interact in the world in a way which seemingly gives them divine providence, right? Because they're aware of the system. But generally speaking, Rambam is talking to those people.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is on that. So do you know who Jean Piaget is?
Yes, of course. The child psychologist.
Yeah, so I was recently watching some Jordan Peterson lectures about John Piaget and constructivism, and basically what he was saying is that, like, Piaget's idea is that as we progress higher in the dominance hierarchy, the more abstract our thinking has to become. Because, for example, when you're a child, the only thing you interact with is what's right in front of you, the physical phenomena. And then when you're like 6, then you start going to more abstract phenomena and object permanence. And then you go above that, you have like laws of logic. And there's like a chain of hierarchy where the higher up you are in age and in the dominance hierarchy, the more abstract your thinking has to be. And it seems like what you're saying is the people with the most power, the judges, the politicians, the political leaders, etc., have to have this, the most abstract, like the broadest span of knowledge about these issues. Or am I misunderstanding?
Right. We'll get into later on, like, where we could go off the reservation with being too abstract. But your point, I hear your point, and it's a good point.
Yeah.
I'll just mention that in the guide, in the Morad, the Guide to the Perplexed, there too, the Rambam in this, very much in his style, talks about how the leader needs to be also very measured. Right. He can't be too compassionate. He can't have too little of compassion. right? As in the judge needs to be, and this is why I go back to the judge, because the figure he is always articulating is this person that is moral and knows how to judge. And it's if someone comes into the courtroom and she's crying, he knows to be blind to the crying, because that is going to cloud his judgment, right? He's here to be the rational intellect, and again, the intellect is ultimately connecting to the divine. And in the Kuzari, even we also see how the ruler, the manhig, is the chassid, right? It's someone that is fully integrated and needs to be this person. So again, Ben, to your question, it's we all want to be the person of Pirkei Avot, right? We all know, obviously, that we all fall short from them. So again, the guide is for everyone to attempt and try, but there are people that must take these things on and must act in this way.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a question that comes up. And when I'm reading Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the righteous, as the Ramchal, it's the same question as rises there by different people in terms of like what is, like if we can't reach these levels, what is the use of doing it? And is it counterproductive to read about something that will be impossible for you to attain? I mean, that is a bigger conversation. Obviously, there's trade-offs here. Yeah,
that's the big difference. One of the biggest difference between the Kabbalists and Maimonides, right, being a rationalist, which is, according to Maimonides, the fools or the wicked are, their soul is basically, it's done. It's a one shot. It's over. According to the mystics, right, it's all emanating, like the divine spark is always divine. It can't disappear, and it connects through different hishtalshuliyot, ultimately back to the source. But according to Maimonides, that ends, and like it doesn't continue on afterwards. So yeah, so it's two very different schools of thought. If someone wants to know more about if Maimonides had a mystical tendency, I recommend them watching the series of
Seekers of Unity.
But just in general, as we read through the Akdama, it also seems that the Rambam really understands that that the core principles of morality are really embedded in like a legal system as well, and that allows you to take abstract moral values and into like enforceable rules, how you actually do these things. And then we also see in Pirkei Avot, a lot of these things are actually broken down into how you act, right? So again, we're taking the abstract and we're actually making it forceful for people to understand what they're supposed to do. Cool.
By the way, I have, this is not as magical as the other book.
Yeah, sure.
But it's saying what you're saying, so that's
it's saying what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least in
any moment when I'm off the reservation, call me out.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just reading down it. You know what? I don't want you to make you keep on switching this text. Let me just get a text of my own. No, where's my Shemana Prakim? Here. Sorry.
So, I just wanted to say,
please.
One small thing. In the beginning, when you started talking about whether someone in power, whether it's relevant people today or someone else, should read Pirkei Avot, my sense for that is like they have, and they have read them many times, I'm sure, but reading in itself is obviously not enough. So that's just a point. I don't know.
Right.
I found that to be like a point that stuck out for me.
I guess I'll clarify. When I say they should read it, like you said, I'm sure they had a civics class. I'm sure they've read many articles, and I'm sure they read many things that, like, if we read them, would be like, oh, this is great. When I say read them, I mean like spend time immersed in this thought process, in this kind of behavior, in these kind of things. So
I guess I don't want to sort of do a gotcha thing. I'm just saying that
please.
I really think it's a question, and a question that, if I'm not mistaken, Maimonides does treat, I think, in Moreh Nevuchim, right? That there is far more to engaging with these things and becoming me'uleh, as he calls it, than just intellectual engagement and knowledge, right? Just to read, just to be just all of this that we're doing, all the chavruta and all of these things are far from sufficient.
Yes. However, I would just add that at the end for the Rambam, of course, you have to do all this behavior, but all of that behavior that you would actually embody ultimately is proper behavior will allow for proper understanding. It all goes back to the intellect at the end of the day. I mean, as far as
in the Rambam's thought.
In the Rambam's thought. As far as Rambam, the only way you reach immortality is through the intellect. That's the only thing that remains, is just that. And that's why it's very like, and well, you know, I think you're making a very good point. Just like it's saying, like, you're right. It's more than just, it's not just sitting and us being in our little brain palace. Correct. It requires embodiment. I'm just saying Maimonides ultimately, the whole structure of humanity is ultimately get back to the brain palace at the end of the day.
There's something actually, Gilad, something that I also found useful reading from the Ramchal that he mentions, I think in Derech Hashem, he mentions about how to interact with any text. He mentions the Torah, but with any text is that in order to connect to its energies, you need two things to happen. And Chazi, correct me if I'm wrong. One is you need to have Irat Hashem. You need to have respect of the author, respect of who, the person or the being that brought about the text and the ideas. And the second thing is that you need to have derech eretz. You need to be a good person. So if you're not a good person and you read something like Pirkei Avot, you can take the dictums and twist them to your own benefits without doing what the author really intended. And also, if you don't have respect of the authors, you might get out, like what you said, is like you might read it and be like, okay, whatever. I mean, that's their opinion or something like that. And that takes away from you actually being able to embody it. So I think that this is actually a difficult point. It's even a little bit unfortunate, is that you have to do work before you even interact with the work. You need to respect it before you do it, because until you have some respect to it, it's very hard to actually take the time and try to integrate it.
Naaseh v'nishma.
Yeah, but it's a very hard concept. Like, why would I spend time on embodying this versus embodying another thing? Like, I don't have time to embody old things.
I mean, this is what the midrash, in a certain sense, is trying to articulate when it says that Nachshon ben Aminadab jumped into the water before it opened up, right? Which, in a sense, was, I mean, obviously that's also like, you know, a leap of faith, literally,
yeah.
But also the sense of like, I need to participate in it for it actually to happen. For the water to split, I need to act. I'm putting aside the metaphysical elements of that, obviously. Mm-hmm. I was going to say something, but now I don't remember what it was. All good. Okay, so we mentioned in the end of the first portion, ואין כל ענייניה גם כן מובנים בלי פירוש ארוך. אם היותה מביאה לידי שלמות גדולה, והצלחה אמיתית, מפני זה ראיתי להרחיב בזה המאמר. Right, so it's a freehand translation that this brings you towards perfection and great and true success. And this is why I wanted to expand on this. So we need to ask, right, what is this perfection that Maimonides is talking about? And he alludes to it later on, right, which is Rambam is always talking about prophecy. That's what he's talking about, right? Chasidut meviah lidei ruach hakodesh. Later on we say, v'hi meviah lidei כמו שאמרו רבותינו, ואין אצלנו מעלה גדולה מחסידות אלא נבואה. והיא מביאה אליה, כמו שאמרו רבותינו, זיכרונם לברכה, חסידות מביאה לידי רוח הקודש. How do they say it again, רוח הקודש in here? The
divine inspiration?
Divine inspiration. Okay, so the study of Masechet Avot is the first step towards prophetic understanding. And it's not just human perfection, it's actually godly perfection, right? It's not that I'm studying Avot so I could be an ethical man, but it's actually studying Avot will allow me to it allows me to fill my tool kit, my utility belt, with the elements I need towards to get to prophecy, which again allows me to phase shift from merely human into connecting back to the source, right? Getting back to the divine. So this is what the great shlemut that Maimonides is talking about, and that's why he also talks about Aristotle as the closest thing a man gets to prophecy, right? But that is not a prophet. It's someone that is like it's getting to that perfect space, so to speak.
Right.
Well, I believe the term is Chachmat Hagoyim, the wisdom of the nations.
Chochmat Hagoyim, yeah. It says Chochma Bagoyim Ta'amid. Wisdom. There's things that we should not take from the Gentiles because their prophetic and let's say theological understandings, generally speaking, are again, as far as Jews are concerned, their frequency is not tuned, and so we should be adhering to our own frequency. Having said that, with regards to general wisdom that exists out there in the world, and we should not only listen to it, but search it and be aware of it, because we of course grow from it as well. Any other questions or? Okay, we're good.
Sorry about that. I just got a call.
It's totally okay. We're going to continue though. Hopefully they'll join. Okay, so let's just focus a little, just also freehand on the relation between the prophecy and the virtues that we're talking about, because we're talking about Masechet Avot over here, ultimately. And in the guide, right, in the Moreh, Rambam gives two reasons for the mitzvot, right? One is like this initial perfection, right? So well-being of the body, physical and monetary. So I want to be doing these things that helps me become a better person. If I'm a better person, I could work better. If I could work better, I could have a better life, and on it goes. And this really happens through, the only way this can really happen is through the body of a state, right? Through a legal system, because I'm interacting in the world with other people. So there's laws, there's taxes, there's rules. I have to play the game within those rules. Then there's my, let's say, if that was the initial perfection, this is the final perfection, right? So this is more about the well-being of the soul, of the nefesh, and understanding all things around me, right? So I have a map of the whole arena. So if the second one doesn't really include deeds, right? It's just the intellectual, but it could only happen after phase one. So this sort of relates to what Gilad was talking about. I want to get to phase two. Well, it's the well-being of the soul, and my mind could be in this place where like I'm understanding everything that's happening around me. And like in the movies, the letters are floating around in the equations. But in order to get to that place, I first need to go through version one, which is the initial perfection, which is the ethics, the games, the rules, being and playing in this world. So I first have to win this realm, and then I can take it on to the next stage. And to your point, Gilad, what we could even understand with our brains is really only phase number one. And that's why that's the only place we're really interacting in. So I could talk about we're only studying this on the intellect, but everyone over here is really not sure even what that means, right? So there's a place we want to build too, but obviously on the ground, it manifests in, yes, being polite, being nice, being righteous, being a chassid, wanting to do all those things. And in that sense, it really seems that the virtues, right, are really a means to an end, right? And they're there to achieve this super intellectual level or this super intellectual status. However, right, the term of, let's say, asiyat chesed and mishpat and tzedakah, right, olam chesed yibaneh, the things we want to do, is how I mimic God when I get to phase two. So be with me for a second again. These virtues, they're sort of hollow in a certain sense. I have to participate in them so they could have meaning. That meaning allows me to phase shift to phase two. Then at phase two, I could recognize that through phase one, I was actually mimicking God.
Wait, so how are they really hollow? Like, is Gemilut Chesed, is charity?
It's not hollow. It's not hollow. You're getting the sachar from it. All that's happening.
forget the sechar though. I mean, they have a benefit on their own. Giving charity has a benefit. Well,
Yeah. So I'm with you. So doing charity has benefit on its own, has benefit to the people receiving it, and also has benefit to the people doing it.
right.
Stage one. Stage two, once you realize the true essence of netinat chesed and doing all that, in that sense, only when you're in that level are you actually manifesting the netinat chesed that like God talks about of ma'ani rachum afatarachum, right? To getting to the place where you could actually manifest, or we're jumping to the end, but it's required. Okay, so another difference between the Kabbalists and the rationalists, or Maimonides. So the Kabbalists Maimonides reads that the Hasidim in the world to come there's Ktarim al Roshehem v'ne'anim mezivas hashchina. For him, it's only about the intellect. So that whole experience of them appreciating what has happened and basking in God's glory only happens in the intellectual level. And for them to fully be part of that experience and to fully bask in God's glory of the Asiyat Chesed. So again, it requires you to, when I said shell, is because it's not fully complete.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way that you're doing Chesed in this plane of existence that you're only doing through your lower levels of your nefesh.
Right.
There are different levels of your nefesh that you want to tap into, and only then, according to the Rambam, are you Tselem Elokim. As in, yes, there's a version of me right now that I'm made in God's image. And I can even do mitzvahs, and that's all nice and good. But the only way this vessel is fully embodying in the mitzvah is all that proper orientation all the way back to the sechel. And then once I'm in that place in the sechel, I could, in theory, like look back at my modes and realize how I'm actually manifesting God's image in this world.
I wanted to sort of introduce to this conversation two figures that I think are interesting, but I'm not sure whether it's too much, like before we even started. So it's
there's no too much.
I think it's Levinas on one hand and Plato on the other hand. So I'll start with the latter, which comes to what you were saying, Ben, with like whether the virtues are hollow or they have value within themselves. So Plato talks about what things are good in their consequences versus what things are good in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
good.
that's the difference between when he talks about the difference between appearance and reality. And Plato is very much with the parable of the cave, right? You want to get towards reality and see through appearances, but there's an essential point that the real, or what actually is, has to be inclusive of its appearance. Its appearances have to be emanations of it. So reality is not contrasted to appearances, it's inclusive of it. So appearance is contrasted to reality, but reality is inclusive of it. And that's generally the relation within Plato, where the absolute is inclusive. So the relative is contrasted to the absolute, but the absolute is inclusive of the relative. So I think that's, I mean, he had
that articulates it a little better.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
from D.C. Schindler in Plato's Critique of Impure Reason. He speaks about it very eloquently. But I think just generally, like Aristotle had some disagreements on that with Plato,
Yep.
but I'm not sure. I don't know enough where Maimonides lands on that, but I think he's closer to at least accept that last statement that I was saying. And as for Levinas, I think the focus that the Rambam is placing on the sort of intellect is also, I think Levinas would I don't know if condemning it is the right word, but it would seem self-centered, I think, in Levinas's world, where Levinas says that your focus always has to be outwardly. It has to be towards Hazulat, the other. And there's a sense that I think that when you read the Rambam prima facie, like that appears missing, and I think that also is sort of the relates with the conflict we were talking about with, like, how do you engage with these things?
Right. So I would say yes, very a lot of avodah, like, self-centered work, of course, as far as the Rambam is considered. And again, like you said earlier, like being nice to your neighbor or doing good deeds is all an element which allows you to work on your self-work purpose. Right. So I think that's a very good. Thank you for that, and I don't think that was too much at all. It actually brings us even more clarity. Now we were talking about, again, the relation between the prophecy and the virtues, right? So we were talking about over here how these virtues work, but as far as just the essence of the prophecy itself. So first off, the prophecy is not megaleh atidot. It's not a fortune teller, right? It's more of a discussion and a revelation of God with man, right? So we should just notice the difference between like how it's known culturally and how we see it from our tradition. And in that sense, speech is really like, it's a moral act, right? Because it's an act of recognizing the other subjectively and seeing. It allows you to do v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And for me speaking to you, I need to do that. And that's why the speech is very important, because it gives in that moral, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess dynamic is fine, but that moral dynamic when focusing on the speech itself. And God speaking is really speaking to us through revelation is really a continuous act of creation, right? Which God starts with speaking, and God is reaching out to the person, and as a person, right? He's talking out to him, which is also why God could also refuse to speaking to someone that reaches a prophetic level. So unlike the philosophers who are really, the God they reach is like the arenic God and not the agentic God. And as far as the philosophers are concerned, as long as you do all these things, you'll get to point X where like you've studied enough and learned enough, and now you're in this place where like you should be able to stand the arena well enough to realize, this unmoved mover, this thing over here, you've witnessed him. And in Judaism, the attitude is that, and that would be true regardless of your deeds. In Judaism, it's a person-to-person conversation. And because it's personal, God could say, you did all the deeds and you're a great guy. I'm still not interested in having a conversation with you right now. Prophecy is not promised to one who completes all the steps. Prophecy is something that you could reach, assuming you did all those stuff, and the personal dynamic gets kicked into this. There's a wanting for a conversation to happen as well. Obviously, what that conversation looks like and what does God want, these are obviously loose categories. But the idea is that focusing on speech and revelation and its moral element is what I think is noteworthy, that God is looking to have a conversation with us, but that's also why, according to Maimonides, he could avoid having a conversation with us as well. And without speech, right? Ultimately, man has this existential loneliness, right? There's no conversation going on at all. There's no meaning. And that's why, again, in the dibur, in the revelation, packed inside that concept is also a lot of meaning, a lot of meaning as well. And in a Olam Tukan, in a fixed world, a properly oriented world, prophecy is felt all around us. And in today's world, where prophecy is no longer with us, we use intellectual tricks to try to understand what our forefathers already knew through experience, right? So we need all of. I'm sorry, I just thought I dropped something. We need all of Maimonides' tools, or all our intellectual tools, or philosophical tools, to allow us to scratch on what that experience could have been like. As far as
I have a question about prophecy in the Rambam, which I'm just not familiar enough with what he means by that. So in Vervaeke's lectures on meaning crisis, he talks about how the Old Testament prophets are not sort of fortune tellers, but rather they're the ones who can tell you that you've strayed off the path. They can sort of, and I'm wondering if that's the sort of prophecy that the Rambam is discussing, or does he have a sort of different or wider version? Because I know that there's quite a few.
No, that would be Rambam's.
Can I also
I mentioned this in the past.
Metaphor that maybe will help us.
A metaphor?
A metaphor, yeah.
Well, I'll give you a live example. A metaphor he gives that's very eerie. This is talking about hashgacha pratit, but it also relates to prophecy as well. Prophecy is, like I said earlier about the Matrix, is there's a message from God, but in a certain sense, God is always speaking, and then there's the personal message as well that's happening. And if the weatherman with all his tools today slowly but surely starts getting more and more data points, I know people actually don't know about the weather, but for all intents and purposes, we have all these data points that allow me to get a closer and closer prediction. But I have to be aware of all these elements, and we start noticing, how the weather pattern in Australia is going to affect the weather pattern in the Amazon. So I have to be aware of all these things. And if I'm aware of all these things, and sometimes to be aware of these things, it requires me to be a righteous person, to work hard. So there's also stages to allow me to even open up my eyes or get the right glasses. But assuming I have the right glasses on, then I could see the full picture. I could hear God speaking to me. And because of that, I also know what God wants of me, and I know how to act in this world. I would also know how to give people advice and say, like, hey, be careful of that. Now, Maimonides gives an example of how it would be silly to think how, unfortunately, many religious people and even Jews think, I'm going to say this tractate, I'm going to say this verse in Psalms, and now my grandma's cancer is going to go away, right? So, like, that's very much not how it works. And he says, you can't expect a guy getting on a boat and there's going to be a storm that God's now going to change the storm and the guy's going to be okay. Someone with prophetic abilities would be aware of the matrix in front of him and know, hey, now's not the right time to get on this boat. And he would feel that. But it's far and few between are the people that could actually do that. And why this is eerie is because the way Maimonides' brother dies is on a shipwreck, on a boat. And it's as if to say, like, my brother, who was obviously also like a very wise man, he didn't have divine prophecy either. He didn't have the prophetic ability. He couldn't see this. He couldn't see this coming, and he didn't read it. And that's why, unlike the mystical traditions, where, like, at every moment everything's changing, right? That's very much not like Rambam. He goes. We also touch upon it in this chapter, but he'll go as far and say, according to Aristotle, well, he mentions on later on about the midabrim, the people that speak, and this relates to the kalam, the Arabs that were speaking, how he says they misunderstood, how they missed the mark with their understanding their relationship with God. And one of the reasons is because they defy Aristotle's teachings of, there's some things that could be, there's some things that are, and there's some things that can't be. And their attitude was everything can happen, anything's possible. And as far as Maimonides is concerned, everything is possible within God. But once God is playing with the realm that he's built, he has to play by the rules as well. Nothing new can happen. God can't, he gives, I think, an example of the triangle, right? God can't create a triangle where, like, that the sides are not
more than 180 degrees. You can't
correct.
Correct.
It's because you can't. God is limited in his own realm. Now, the Kabbalist would argue that the Muslims, the Kalam that got it wrong, they only got it partially wrong, right? They were getting as close as they can to the source, because the source is what occurs before this reality, right? If you want to call it before the inflation theory, what's before. So yes, everything is possible, but it depends at what level of reality you're judging them, right? According to Maimonides, the game we're playing right now called this universe, this world, then God is bound by the rules that he instituted as well. So in that sense, prophecy wouldn't be you finding like a loophole in the system. Rather, it's a much better understanding and reading of the system.
Yeah. Do you know what the YouTube channel Hiddebrute?
I'm sorry?
Do you know the YouTube channel Hiddebrute?
No. Hidabrut. Yes. I don't know the YouTube channel. I know of it.
Okay. So I was watching a video and I watched this because Jacob was reacting to it from Hiddebrut, where it was Rabbi Yitzhak Baton, Rabbi David Gottlieb, and a couple of other very prominent rabbis in the Haredi world who were prominently criticizing Rabbi Yosef Mizrachi and Yoron Reuven, because they were basically calling Manos Friedman a heretic for saying God needs us. And what David Gottlieb was saying was that God does not need human beings by his essence, but it's like a chess game. So when you play chess, you're confined to the rules of chess, but you don't have to play. But because God decided to create human beings and play the game of human beings, he has to obey the rules. And therefore, in that sense, because God desires us, to the extent he desires us, he needs us. But that's only because God chooses to desire us.
Right. So God wanting, God desiring, God needing, all very, very difficult words. Just on that note, and something that I've said often, which is Kadoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani. Be holy, for I am holy. And in the sense God needs us is God is the only holy one that exists. He is interested in having a conversation, not being the only holy one, and having a conversation with us. And so there's an invitation for us to act holy. And if we act holy, connecting back to the Maimonides, and you could look at assuming according to Maimonides, acting holy is being righteous. Being righteous is being fully aware of the map. Being fully aware of the map is being in this, intellectual space when you fully understand everything, which of course included the experiential as well. Then you are in the image of God. And once you're in the image of God and you're in this place and you're holy, there could be a connection and a conversation and a relationship with God. And then he is no longer the only lonely one. And that is what he wants or needs in that sense. Okay. Okay. And so we spoke about that. Okay. So now just going to the sources, and I think Ben will end on we'll finish the Hakdama before we go into chapter 1, which will continue, I guess, next week. Right? So that's why he decides, right? So he goes through about where he's getting his sources from, right? So since Rambam believes that morality is universal, right? He gives us 3 different sources. He gives us Chazal, all the rabbis, right? The Talmud, the Tanakh, all the good stuff, the philosophers, and the common man, your regular Joe. And he goes to his famous line, "Hear the truth from he who speaks it." What is the exact translation in English?
For which one?
V'shama ha'emet mimi she'amro.
Shema emet. Let's see.
I'm saying hear the truth from he who speaks it, but I just want to know if there's a better way to say it.
Accept the truth from the source it proceeds, from whatever source it proceeds.
Wouldn't it be accept the truth from whatever source it proceeds from? Whatever. We'll leave it for them. Sorry, what a joke. No. So first of all, super important line. We should all feel more comfortable to use that line and feel confident about that line. Obviously, there's due diligence involved with that, right? Which the assumption is, and this is also classic Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, where he says, I did all the homework, I did all the research, I did all the summarizing. You don't have to look at anything else. You don't have to look at the Talmud. I did it all for you, right? So we're assuming that Rambam did his due diligence when he's telling us this. And the reason he doesn't quote all his references, which he lets us know, one is it's technical, right? I don't want it to be too long. We're moving forward. This is just Hakdama. I want us to be able to move forward in our learning, and therefore I don't want us to constantly go back. There's also a substantive reason, which is many people, specifically people in the Jewish tradition, are not at that time are not going to accept the truth from foreign sources, right? Like if I'm bringing Aristotle right now or El-Farabi, like people might decide to get into the theological conversation. Is this heresy? Is this idol worship? So that's why he is avoiding that. He's just saying, I don't want the drama, right? So, and I'm sometimes going to quote it exactly word for word, which is sort of a double-edged sword, because you'll end up finding a ultra-Orthodox person quoting a Maimonides. He doesn't realize he's actually quoting Aristotle, or he's actually quoting word for word some Muslim cleric, right? And for Maimonides, it's almost ideal because now it's sort of, it's baked into the system right now. And once you can't differentiate who said who, then you're sort of safe from people's cherry picking and saying like, no, this line, no, this line, yes. Rest assured, the censors came, and many of Maimonides' books were A, burnt, and B, censored, as we know. But nevertheless, he was clearly trying. Want to add something?
Go on. Just real quick, can you mute yourself? So what I was going to say is, I think maybe this is the best way to phrase it. Maimonides is saying the essential truth exists in the Torah. So that's like, essentially speaking, the Torah, the Talmud, Zohar, well, arguably, depending on whether or not you accept Kabbalah as legitimate, but Torah sources are essential truth. However, the way to frame truth and the way to understand it, sort of like the looking glass that we're looking through, or the magnifying glass, or the microscope, is can come from non-Torah sources. So the Torah is true regardless of what anybody else says. However, and how we look at the Torah and apply it as average people, integrating, say, Kierkegaard with the Rav, or Maimonides with Aristotle, integrating secular philosophers to look through the lens of Torah, is proper. Or do you think that's a bad way to phrase it?
No, I don't think it's a bad way to phrase it. Interestingly enough, I want to try to flip it for a second, even though I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but this relates to the question of, we know in Judaism, which is right? One who should quote his source, and he brings redemption to the world. And if we know that, why is Maimonides saying right now that, like, A, it's too long, and B, people won't accept the truth? So let's say people won't accept the truth. I get that. But that it's too long would be the reason not to do it. We clearly know that there's teachings to teach it. So continuing with what you were saying, Maimonides holds that Torah is ultimate truth. And because it's ultimate truth, it's very important that the person teaching it, we know that the source is, it's divine truth. We need to know that the source is legit. And that's why I always want to connect the source, because I want to make sure people realize that you're getting the real deal. However, with regards to morality, because he believes that morality is built into the system, unlike the divine truth, it's a natural truth that exists. And it doesn't matter whether I say it or someone else says it 1,000 years from now, it was true. And because of that, there's no need for me being the Rambam, to quote who said what. And that's what he's saying. I'm bringing it to you from the Greeks. I'm bringing it to you from the Muslims. It doesn't matter. I'm here now explaining to you what you need to know, because it's true. This is true always.
Right. So this is sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that I think he also makes another point which I found important just as I entered. And I didn't want to bring it back, but since it's come up again, he treats, I think, properly the fluency of language and communication, which is important, right? Because he says, like, when I speak to you, I need to speak to you in the most direct way to promote understanding. And if, you were saying, it's too long. It's not just that it's too long. It's cumbersome. The way that we communicate things matters. And I think it's kind of relevant to today's world, because I remember this was a bit quite like more than a decade ago, but I had a friend in the Gap Year program who I would say like something like, A is a good movie, and he would say, in your opinion. It's like, obviously, in my opinion, I don't need to like now give a disclaimer whenever I speak to add "in my opinion," because then our communication would be tedious and annoying, right?
That would be true.
Is that why? Is that why it's so? Is that why it's so? Is that why it can be so annoying? Even though, like, I don't know why necessarily it's annoying to hear people say their pronouns in the middle, like in the beginning of every sentence, in the beginning of like a conversation.
Well,
like, there's something that you need to get to, like, to even feel comfortable doing that.
I'm starting to jump in on Gilad because he obviously could answer this, but I mean, he's feel free to answer this. But when you hear someone's pronouns, someone is basically mapping out for you reality, forcefully mapping out for you reality, which is what is strange. You're not saying an opinion. You're saying this is how I need to be called. It's not how I think I should be called. This is how you need to call me, and this is how reality works. So I think that's that's obviously strange to demand that from people. I say this often, how, and this is alluding to what Gilad is saying about, not about qualifying in my opinion, but if the word literally today in the dictionary also means figuratively, right? So then you get to a point where you actually do have to clarify. When I said literally, I actually meant what I thought we were talking about all this time, and not what the millennials are talking about, or Gen Z. And we'll see in chapter 1, Maimonides actually dives right into that, and he talks about when we're going to talk about the nefesh, where, let's say, the soul or the life force is a better example. But he says some people call it, like the philosophers call life force X, and other people call life force Y. But I mean, so like he does clarify, because there's a sense that over the years, words, concept, ideas, sort of get bastardized, get lost in translation. And then if you're still trying to use the same language, that gets very difficult. I mean, Gilad, I don't know. I mean, if you go on YouTube and you write, let's say, slang of Gen Z, right? Now, this is true about the slang that we've had, but like you realize that as words start get reappropriated, you can find yourself being lost in a conversation. Like, I speak English and I'm only like 10 years older than this person, and I have no idea what's flying. I can't communicate with you.
I'll just add to that I think I mean, you're definitely right, but there's also a sense to that, which goes back to the Tower of Babel, right? There's a question like that linguists discuss, right? If the purpose of language was just fluent communication, which it seems like a lot of it goes towards that, then why aren't we all speaking the same language, right? Clearly, neighbors, wherever there's cross-pollination, that could happen, but actually language does both. It can be used to obfuscate. That's why different nations develop different languages. And you can see it even in children, where they develop their own secret languages that they don't want the adults to understand, and it's kind of cute. But like
it's also a signal. It's to hide, say more easily. It's to hide, like what you said, but it's also to signal, I feel like, because
it's in-group signaling, sure.
Yeah, like signal over, like, it's an extra effort kind of thing. I mean, the only metaphor that might sound cutesy for me that I can think of, or the example, is that, like, my wife doesn't necessarily know Hebrew too much, but if I tell her that I love her in Hebrew, just because I put the effort into it, or just because it's something that's slightly unique, that's going to mean more to her. It's going to kind of be more cute to her if I say it in Hebrew than I say it in English. So it's a hiding, but then it's actually a signaling. It's like an extra effort thing.
I think so, and I think it's also why Israelis get Chinese letters, on tattoos, and people abroad would get just like words in Hebrew tattooed. And like for me, you read someone with some words in Hebrew that they don't understand. It's really weird because it's your language. And I guess it's the same for the Chinese who watch someone who got some wrong character in some cheap tattoo parlor, and it means something, instead of wisdom, it means something like barbecue or something like that.
So the Tower of Babel, like you mentioned, Gilad, that when it says the Aretz Safa Achat Dvarim Achadim, right? And there's a sense over there which is everything was concretized, and it was what it was, and like you're saying about in-group, out-group, there's one group, and you are a mason and you are a builder, and like everyone was doing what they're doing, and you could assume also terminology was also very very condensed. And the midrash says, like, the midrash gives us an example where like there was confusion, where suddenly, one wanted a hammer and he didn't understand what he wanted, and like, he dropped the hammer on his head. That's like the little kid's story of like it didn't work out. And there's a sense, let's say they did all speak differently, a different language magically. Let's say that happened. I could still look at you and be like, give me hammer, right? Like, why did like the whole operation fall apart? Because it's not that just like words meant different things. Now, Joe the Mason suddenly decides, I don't want to be a Mason. That's not who I am anymore. Like, and there's a sense of like, it's not just a language. It's just like your categories don't fit me anymore. And then there's like, right. So everyone breaks out. In Zephaniah, when it talks about that we all come to the temple in one accord and in pure speech, I believe this is the rectification of that, which is, it doesn't mean we go back to one language. Means we go back to the multiple languages that we have, but we understand each other and we can actually speak to each other. And I just want to comment and relate that to what Young God is asking over here, because this is, for all intents and purposes, a Jewish stream. So chosen. So I've said this, which is Zgula. One of the interpretations of Zgula is Mesugalut. What are you capable of? And I want to use also an example of color. If every nation is the chosen nation. They see themselves as chosen. And they have actually all been chosen and selected to be mesugal, to be capable of doing things. And I give an example of how, like, the Russians are great at math and logic games. And you could go on and on the list of people, and they all come with their bouquet. They all come with their color that they could do. The chosenness of the people of Israel is that they have no color. It's see-through, and we are not capable of one thing. We allow, if you look at light breaking through the glass prism, and it shows different colors, we allow the other nations of the world to shine through us to achieve pure speech. That is what we're special about. So it allows the Hindu to represent his Hindu through a Jewish perspective to God. The Muslim, the Christian, I understand this could sound to some people off-putting. That's fine. But I would just say its chosenness is not in genetics. Its chosenness is not in that the individuals is more holy. The chosenness is in a vessel that allows to assist the other nations of the world. So by that, we mean chosenness, young God. And I could just connected it to the Babel thing, which is we are the Google Translate in that sense, right? We're welcoming everyone to come and then allow for the conversation to be a pure speech, assuming we are the ones that could purify it. Please God, when we're doing much better.
One more thing about the Tower of Babel thing. I see Ben also wants to talk, so sorry for also grabbing the mic too much. I think when you say Safa Achat Dvarim Achadim, the way that I interpret that is the sort of Orwellian newspeak sort of situation, right? When you have a language and the language is only allowing for Dvarim Achadim, right? It doesn't. When you look at the languages that exist in the world, there are many things that you cannot translate. You simply can't. And so I think like that's definitely a feature of that dissemination. And like you say, if you want to have pure speech, your language has to allow for the things you want to say. And I think in that sense, Orwell, really had a brilliant insight when he was discussing newspeak and how language can constrain what we are able to think about and what we are able to become. So that's at least how I read that phrase.
I think that's a great way of reading it. And this it dovetails with Rabbi Kook's understanding of the other religions of the world, right? Which is also, if while we see Torah as very special, it would be silly to think that God could be limited, right, to like one word or one idea. And so Rav Kook says that all the other religions of the world also have their divine spark in them. And our job is, right, to identify that so we can understand that language as well. And this goes back to the Noahide movement, which is very much wanting each religion to still safeguard and bring forward all that's pure and holy in their culture, because these are all different manifestations and languages to talk about the ineffable. Just want to see some comments. And in the meantime, feel free to comment, Ben or Cool Guy. Hey, guys, just came back from it. Goes in humility. Looking forward to watching this chat. Okay, thank you. I hope you enjoyed yours. The hypocrisy must be pointed out. Flawless. Late to the game. I'm not sure what the hypocrisy was about. Maybe the idea is that perfection of the intellect could set the stage for the upper parts of their job without us having to have the reins. I know what he's talking about right now. I need to think about that. Hello, Rabbi Malot. Hello. I mean, what? Okay, we just spoke about that.
Yeah.
RJ, goodbye. Go ahead, Kirk. You can talk.
I just wanted to know, who is Yon God? Do I know this person?
It's a guy that's in the community. Lovely man. That's a borderline.
I saw him in the Discord. But I didn't see him on stream. At least not that I remember.
Here, he's a cool looking dude. It's cool shades. Yes, this is a borderline secular assessment of prophecy. Maimonides has, again, like I said, the fact that Maimonides comes and says that God is limited, that's also bonkers, obviously, for many people.
I'll just add to that this is actually what the head of my secular yeshiva had said he experienced as a teenager reading Rambam. He eventually became secular, as the spoiler alert going. But he said reading Rambam, he felt like, come on, you're almost there.
Right.
Just make one more step. So that is a sense that many people, I think even religious, get from Rambam. Like, this is almost secular. I'm feeling uncomfortable about this.
Well, in the guide, in the guide, he says, I'm going to say things that contradict themselves. You're not going to understand me. If you can't understand me, then this not book is for you. But ultimately, he is in a place of doubt himself.
Yeah.
He stands in that place of doubt. He is the perplexed one. Right now, he gives you all the tools you need to, like, it's basically saying, like, if you want to, I could give you a lifetime of conversation where you never have to actually touch that point where you're uncomfortable. Because you could just talk and ideas but yes, he had his doubts, even though I don't want to say even though, I think maybe because of that, he was the great eagle. Yes, go ahead, Kirk.
One final thing is, so you didn't find anything, you were talking about prophecy, you didn't find anything in Judaism about Moshe Eliade?
Oh, you asked me about Moshe Eliade, right?
Yeah, I asked in the Discord, but I wanted to know.
Right, I think I mentioned to you that, like, again, he first of all, Yosef had more to say over there, but I could be less read about those stuff. My brief interaction with that intersection was that Eliade, even though he was quite brilliant, like many, did not dive deep enough into Judaism to know its mystical community and how ritual based and practice based it is. So I think that gave him a very skewed understanding of Judaism, and, like, obviously Carl Jung did a much deeper dive to that aspect. So, but I think if I recall correctly, Yosef actually gave you some information over there to some references.
Well, he said Rosenzweig had something about the notion of linear time, but or liturgical time, but I'll look more into that. It's just I just want to see if there's anything more you found.
I think he was. I think, like I said, I don't think he was understood enough about Judaism to actually give us his opinion. Unlike Levinas, for example, who wasn't as observant, but I think had a tremendous amount of insight, though, I mean, the French in general. Okay.
By the way, I need to head out in the next few minutes, so I don't know if you
Well,
want
I
to
think
wrap up.
we'll continue chapter 1 next week. It'll probably take us 2 rounds to go through chapter 1, and then hala vehala.
Sounds good.
Ben, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.